I don't know why it starts looking with him. I'm the one that hit the button. Right, hi there, I'm Ron Juckett, and he's Drew Douglas. And welcome to this off-season edition of the DoDCast for this Halloween night. Woo! 2017. I am dressed up as an underpaid sports writer. What are you dressed up for as this Halloween?
Just a depressed Nationals fan.
As you can tell, we went quite, off our normal roles to come up with these amazing Halloween outfits. And I'm not eating any candy. I have a dish of nuts because I was bad and had Five Guys for lunch today. All right. So the big topic since we got together with you last was the hiring of Davey, I guess, Martinez as manager of the Washington Nationals. One of those guys that interviewed a bunch of times for jobs, including before the hiring of Matt Williams with Washington, and now he has it. Your thoughts as we enter the Davey Martinez era?
Yeah, I'm excited to have him. I was really happy that the Nationals decided to give him the 3 years with the option for fourth year. I think that's now the industry standard, and it's really beneficial to give the manager some job security as they haven't done in the past. But I'm just really excited to have him. He's worked with Joe Madden both in Tampa Bay and Chicago. He made the World Series in Tampa Bay. He won it in Chicago. So he has a lot of experience under one of the most well-respected managers in the league. So hopefully he'll do just as well as Madden and bring that great experience to this Nationals team.
Yeah, I think they really wanted a guy with analytics experience, and he has that. And Joe Madden has used that to his advantage. You go back to the job that crew did with Tampa. I mean, Chicago was a pretty well-stacked team. You go back to look what he did with Tampa about 10 years ago. The trip to the World Series and nearly again, and then continuous trips to the playoffs. They got the most out of Evan Longoria, some solid pitching, and that's about it. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this team because obviously everywhere he's gone, especially with Tampa, people have wanted him to be the manager. This is a long time coming.
Yeah, and he doesn't have any managerial experience, but he has just a lot of great coaching experience, and he has been very successful in the past. So for the team who's failed to make it out of the NLDS so far, hopefully he brings what it takes, and he'll get them over the hump into at least the NLCS.
Seth wishes us a happy Halloween, and he makes a bold prediction that Justin Verlander will toss a perfect game tonight. Wow, that would be something. How much of getting back to Martinez, how much is that lack of managerial experience really at any level of concern to you?
I'm not too concerned about it because a lot of the other candidates that they were looking at, other than Joe Girardi and John Farrell, if they had any experience at all, it was in the minor leagues. So he's been a bench coach, which is basically like the second manager. He's got a ton of experience. Like I said, he's been successful. So I'm not too concerned that he doesn't have any managerial experience.
Okay. The first time he bats a pitcher eighth, when Max Scherzer comes up on batting eighth on opening day, don't faint. I mean, Joe Madden loves to do that, and I would imagine that Martinez will at least try out of the gate a lot of the tricks that Madden did to motivate teams and keep them going. So you're going to see a lot more analytical things. Any other changes you think regarding the lineup? Do you think he will keep Trey Turner as a leadoff hitter, or will Adam Eaton get it? Or what subtle changes do you think he's going to make compared to what we've seen this past year?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Adam Eaton move up into the leadoff spot next year. You split up the righties and lefties if you're going to have a guy like Bryce Harper or Daniel Murphy in the 3-hole. And then Turner has more power, so he just makes a little more sense in the 2-hole. And the thing that a lot of people were criticizing Turner on this season, where he doesn't see enough pitches, and that's really what you want out of your leadoff hitter. So I think Eaton does move up into the leadoff spot unless there are concerns about his leg, which I don't think there will be because he was pushing to even come back this year. So I don't think there'll be any concerns at all come opening day.
What other – we don't rehearse these things or even talk about topics ahead of time, so these are all good questions for Drew. What other minor changes do you think you might see from him that we haven't seen before?
Maybe we see different bullpen usage. I know the Nationals' last manager, Dusty Baker, is a little bit unprecedented where he'd like to stick with his starters a little more than other managers would. So maybe we see just the management of the pitchers a little differently. But I don't know. Obviously, Martinez has never been a manager. We don't know his specific style. Maybe he will like to do what Joe Madden did, but I don't really know what his actual individual style will be.
Right. I guess that's kind of the wild card is that obviously one of the things that management was not happy with Dusty Baker was the way that he managed in games. And now you have a complete unknown. That doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. Look at what Dave Roberts has done with the Dodgers in his 2 years there. They may not win the World Series, but he got them there for the first time in 30 years. So Seth says one of the big change from Martinez is getting out of the first round, which, is why they hired him. I guess I'll piggyback on the Seth thing for a second. Giving him the 3 years with an option for a fourth means, and with the way that the Nationals hate eating money, is regardless of how they do in the playoffs, assuming that they make the playoffs, that he gets 2019 no matter what. Would you assume that, or is this a case of, would you assume that to be the case?
Yeah, I would think so, especially with some people saying the window is closing. I don't think the window is closing after this season, even if they do lose Harper and Murphy, but I think they're really preparing for a long run with Martinez, if possible. I think they'll definitely at least get the 2 years.
Yeah, I can see if it doesn't go well after the second year, they could get rid of him. But the window, I don't think closes after next year, regardless of what Harper does. The outfield prospects are good. They've drafted some decent pitching. As long as they let the baseball operations side run the on-field part of it, I think the Nationals will be contending for a long time. And to me, the hire of Martinez means that they actually listen to the baseball operations this time. We don't know the money obviously yet, but since he's a first-time manager, it's not going to be as much as a Joe Girardi or even a John Farrell. But that's a win for baseball operations to sit there and say, look, they may not have handled the dismissal of Baker the way that you'd want them to handle it, or as cleanly as it should have been handled. But this was not to me, does not smell like a Scott Boras hire. Does it to you?
No, I think this was probably Rizzo's guy, especially after we saw the statement from Mike Rizzo. I think this was his decision. I know I read that he didn't want Dusty Baker to go, but I think, the Davey Martinez hire definitely was Rizzo's pick.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other person that they interviewed for the process was John Farrell, and our old friend Ricky Keeler was surprised that they went that quickly. And Farrell, I don't think deserves to have some time off from a manager, but it would not surprise me, as Seth tells me, I can breathe easier, that if Farrell might be brought in as a pitching coach, depending on how well he interviewed. He was a good pitching coach for the Red Sox, also has some front office experience with the Cleveland Indians. Was it Jorge Castillo today, or Jamal Collier that tweeted the Kevin Long thing?
That was Jorge Castillo
from the Washington Post, and that Long may be in line for the hitting coach. So it'll be interesting to see who Martinez puts around him. Judo says, I like the idea that Martinez is a player's manager who's good with statistics, the best of the last two managers. And with that, Judo is pretty much is a Madden clone. He really is a hard sabermetrician and knows how to use those numbers and gets them, as I said earlier. I mean, what Madden got out of all those years in Tampa Bay, will really help. They over exceeded pretty much every year, including that trip to the World Series. So, I think in that aspect, Martinez is going to be good. The one concern I have is that we had pretty much every year, or the last couple of years, is how do you keep a team motivated when their results are pretty much known? It's one of the things I think that kind of worked against Dusty Baker. They clinched 3 weeks early, and how he tried to motivate him seemed to backfire. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I think it did. I think probably clinching 3 weeks before the season ended, I think it did end up hurting them in the end, because their offense just kind of stopped producing, and that carried over into the postseason where we saw, other than Game 5 when they put up, was 8 runs, really didn't hit a whole lot throughout that series. And so, yeah, I think after they clinched, there wasn't really a whole lot to play for other than the #1 seed, which was pretty far out of reach. So there wasn't a whole lot to play for, and they just weren't that motivated for most of September.
Judo says they called Joe Girardi from the Yankees. And before I read the rest of that, are you absolutely stunned that the Yankees let Joe Girardi go?
Yeah, I was. I mean, this team wasn't even supposed to finish 500 this year, and they ended up 1 win away from going to the World Series and let Girardi go. So I was very surprised to see him lose his job.
Ricky and I have been chatting back and forth about how much managers mean. This kind of goes against the consensus that managers mean nothing with the Martinez hire. I mean, here's a guy that's been a finalist for jobs for 1,000 years. Well, really for the last decade, in all seriousness. What do you think a manager in this day and age means to a team?
I'm not sure. I mean, too much. I think they really mean a lot in the clubhouse and just keeping the team, keeping everyone on the same page. But now there's so many stats and sabermetrics and everything, and they're just kind of expected to use those. So, I mean, you see a lot of guys now with binders and stuff, and I think they're looking at those binders and seeing the stats, and that's what's telling them kind of what to do. So Dusty was kind of an oddball, or he was going with his gut some of the time. But I think, yeah, in today's game, manager definitely doesn't mean as much as it used to.
Right. I mean, the stats tell a lot of the story, and even though I'm not one who kind of goes on and glows about sabermetrics, they are useful. Analytics are important. You have to know what tendencies are, but you also have to have the experience to be able to manage sometimes for your gut. But sometimes it's better to go off with the numbers. I'll say back to Judo's point. They called Girardi, which is a good thing to show how serious they are. But I don't think Girardi's style would have meshed well with the Nats. I don't really know Girardi enough to say yay or nay to that. The Yankees got a lot of help this year from the kids. And Aaron Judge really is one hell of a ball player. You know, he's not just he doesn't come across as a one-trick pony. Judah says, I'm envisioning, excuse me, that seltzer just came back. I'm just envisioning Kevin Long as pitching coach, Murphy, Max, and Martinez sitting there on the clubhouse talking numbers all day. Well, you know, I'm sure it'd be an interesting conversation. Hopefully there is some video involved so I could understand it. Seth asked, will we be having a DoDCast post-game show this day next year? Calendar changes every year, so I don't know when the World Series would be. I would like to be doing one, but I'm not ready to say that the Nats are a World Series team yet. They need to figure out who their fifth starter is going to be, and they really need to get the catching situation resolved. And we don't know what injuries are going to happen. You know, I don't want to say that Adam Eaton was the reason why they couldn't get past the Cubs, but not having him in the lineup in the playoffs hurt. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think having Eaton back next year will definitely help, especially with Worth. Obviously, a lot of people are putting the blame on him. I wouldn't blame him, but he definitely isn't what he once was. So having Taylor in center and Eaton in left will definitely help. The Nationals were really reliant on the long ball this year, and Eaton is a guy who can kind of manufacture some runs, which is what we were hoping Trey Turner would do, but he didn't hit too much in the series. So I'm hoping we'll be here doing a DoDCast post-game show next year in the World Series, but the Nationals definitely have some work to do, and hope everyone stays healthy, which is something this team hasn't proven to be able to do over the last couple of years.
Playoffs are such a crapshoot. I mean, we got a World Series where everyone thought the Dodgers would be in the World Series. And we thought it'd be either Cleveland or Houston in the American League, or I thought so anyway. And the Yankees pushed Houston right to the limit to a Game 7. And now no one's bullpen is fresh. You know, it's all picked over garbage right now. But just because a team does well in the regular season does not mean that they're a good team in the playoffs. I know that's kind of oversimplifying things. So on paper, do I like the Nats' chances of being in the World Series next year? I don't know. What about you?
I think if they get a decent fifth starter or even someone further up in the rotation, Thomas Boswell from the Washington Post was saying he wanted maybe a three starter. So I think if they get a quality starter to fill out the rotation, and hopefully they'll address the need at catcher because Matt Wieters just really wasn't cutting it this year. I think they definitely have a good shot. Like you said, the playoffs are really a crapshoot, so anything can happen. But, I mean, once you get into the playoffs, you never know. So, I mean, I definitely wouldn't be surprised. I personally would be happy with just getting to NLCS. But, so yeah, I could see them in it, but I'm not sure that they're ready as we stand today.
I thought this was their best chance, just because of the way that because that offense was just lethal. But when they lost, they just couldn't score any runs, and you can't really have those kind of slumps in the playoffs, as you saw. Seth asks, "What if Eric Fetty turns into the 2018 Aaron Judge, as a not supposed to break, but doesn't have a rookie of the year type year?" I think that really comes down to how good a spring is, Seth. I can see where Fetty may not make the team out of spring training and come up as an injury. They won't be messing around with him this year, moving him to reliever and then as a starter again. And that better not happen. But I don't know. I mean, it's certainly possible, but Fetty needs to work on his fastball, and he needs an out pitch. I'm not talking about just a strikeout, because he can strike batters out, but he has to find ways to get other hitters out, and he has to, have a fastball that's a major league fastball. His breaking stuff is incredible. But I remember a couple times sitting there watching him try to throw pitches and wondering, well, why didn't you get out? Well, because these are much better hitters than they are in AAA. So we'll see. We'll see. Judo says Mariners versus the Nats in the World Series next year. I'm not sure what you're seeing in the Mariners. I think the Yankees are quite good in the American League. I don't think that this was a fluke at all. I like the Alex Cora hire for Boston. I think it's an absolutely wonderful hire. But the Red Sox have their issues. I think Cleveland needs to figure out a way to finally get over the hump. So, and of course, Houston, I think, is in it for at least a couple more years. So I'm not sure what you're seeing with Seattle. Not saying it's a bad team. In the National League, look, the Nats are a playoff team on paper, but Mike Maddox has gone to St. Louis. You know that they're going to retool. I think the Cubs will be fine. I was quite impressed with Milwaukee this year. I think they really will be a contender, and we'll see what Arizona and Colorado do. I mean, just, I guess, a quick preview. I mean, who are you looking forward to seeing next year, Drew? Who do you think are the contenders?
I think obviously the Nats will be good, like you said. Milwaukee is a young team. I think they overperformed this year, but they got a lot of young players coming up who should be good for years to come. So they'll be an exciting team over the next couple of years. The Cardinals, they have some good young players as well as some veterans, but also I think the Maddox addition is huge for them. The Dodgers, we'll see how they do next year, because we've seen in the past playoff teams, they struggle again the next season, especially if you go deep in the playoffs. But at the same time, the Dodgers, they only had one loss coming into the World Series, so they haven't played as many games as they could have. So I think, there are a lot of good teams in the NL. The NL East is a weaker division, at least for now. There's some teams coming up, like the Braves. But, I think it'll be a lot of the same teams that we saw this year in the postseason back next year.
I remember talking with Ricky back in March during one of the early shows, and we were talking about, how well the Mets and the Giants are going to play this year. That didn't really happen. And if I was to give a guess today, I would say that I would put my money on the Yankees, as much as it kills me to say that, in the American League. And I think the National League is too wide open. I want to see what happens over free agency. Seth asks, what's my favorite part of the postseason? It's nice to watch some baseball and not have to work covering it. But honestly, for me, I'm still bummed that the Nats aren't in it, and so it's hard for me to keep my interest as a lifelong baseball fan, because you do get so involved with one particular team when their season's done. But the World Series has been pretty good.
Yeah, I'm still really bummed that the Nationals aren't in it. I've been thinking about it pretty much every day, how things could have gone differently, and maybe how the Nationals would have fared against the Dodgers in the against the Dodgers in the NLCS. I think they definitely would have fared better than the Cubs. So I am still bummed, but just now getting to watch the World Series, you couldn't really ask for a better series. I came into it saying I probably wasn't going to watch much just because the Nats weren't in it, and I was still upset about that. But right now, I just can't really stop watching it at this point. Just, the games have been so competitive, and this is one of the best World Series that I can remember in my lifetime, at least.
The last couple have been very good. The Chicago-Cleveland one was excellent last year.
Mm-hmm.
And this is right up there. And, part of me wants a Game 7 tomorrow, but I think Justin Verlander closes it out tonight. Seth asks, what team in the National League East gives the Nationals the biggest challenge? We actually have a piece of going up on that tomorrow, as a matter of fact, from Brian Foley. I'll let you answer that first.
One thing I'd keep an eye on is how much the Marlins do this all season, because I read today that they're going to look to trade Giancarlo Stanton, D. Gordon, and Martin Prado. So that's 3 of their better players, and if they do that, they'll probably get great prospects back, but it's not going to help them at the major league level right now. So I think maybe the Braves give them the most fits. I think Snicker is a great manager there. He's done a great job so far. I'm just interested to see what happens with all their front office stuff and if that ends up affecting them. So I think probably the Braves right now, assuming the Mets won't be able to stay healthy.
Right. I mean, the Mets have a new manager as well. And as Judo says, their starting pitching is excellent, but they really don't have the offensive forces to compete with Washington. I would agree with you. I would think Atlanta probably is in the best shape to contend, but they need to have a decent year from Dansby Swanson at the plate. As long as they have Freddie Freeman, they're going to be in pretty good shape. At this point, I don't see anyone coming within 10 games of Washington. But we thought last year that the Mets and Washington were going to be pretty much neck and neck all year. So the best laid plans of mice and men. I love the Gabe Kapler hire in Philadelphia. I don't think that, that might be a team that might contend for 500 coming out of the blue. But once they have all that, after next year and all that money to spend, Philly may not be a contender in 18, but I'll watch what they're going to do in 19 for sure. Seth's watched every pitch of the series. Judo asked, did we all see the Rockies throwing shade on Twitter?
I saw there's just something about how baseball is great, but I didn't see them throw shade.
Explain that one, Judo. Can I imagine Bryce Harper for Stanton trade? No, I can't.
No, I can't either.
I can't either. I think Stanton's probably, Stanton will probably go to the West Coast. I think the Giants, is probably where he ends up. Or I could see Dombrowski doing that with the Red Sox because we don't need minor league talent. I don't see the Marlins are going to try to cut. They are about to have a fire sale, which is too bad because I think they actually have the core to have a good team with Yelich and that. But they're all about making money. I mean, this is if you're going to look at how not to run a baseball team, at least in the early part, the Jeter era is a lot like the Jeffrey Loria era. It's just not how you do it. Yes, they're businesses; they're supposed to make money, but you don't let the baseball people run the team. Bad things happen. Washington Redskins. Seth said, I could see Stanton on the Angels. Oh, imagine that. Imagine Trout and Stanton in the same outfield. But yeah, I think, I would say that it's Atlanta, but you just never know. If the Mets pitching is healthy, that's going to win them some games, even though you got to wonder if Matt Harvey's injuries are to the point where they've where he's never going to be that top level pitcher again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him even non-tendered this whole season.
Now, wouldn't that be stunning? Wouldn't that be stunning? Oh, Judo says the Rocky said if the last game had happened in Colorado, it would have been a joke. But because it was in Houston, it was a classic. Ooh, there are some salty people in the PR department in Colorado. Ask Tom Boswell about that. All right, so coaches obviously are the next thing. I know that the coaches are kind of a dime a dozen. We talked a little bit about Kevin Long. Any other names you'd like to see the Nats go after as far as coaches are concerned?
Yeah, Dave Righetti, he's been the San Francisco Giants pitching coach for, I believe, 18 seasons now, but he was recently re-signed into a front office role after their terrible season last year. So I think if he wants to remain a pitching coach, he's probably the Nats' best option, other than maybe if they're going to bring Farrell in to be the pitching coach. But Righetti, he pitched, like, during his playing career, he was both a starter and a closer, so he knows both roles well. He's been a pitching coach for 18 years. He's worked alongside Bochy for 11 years, so he definitely observed how to successfully run a team, and he had some great staffs out in San Francisco. I think he'd be a great option if he wants to remain a pitching coach.
I would agree with that. And on July 4th, 1983, Dave Righetti no-hit the Boston Red Sox, and I didn't like him after that. But you're absolutely right. He was one of the early pitchers to make that conversion from a good starter, I believe he was an all-star starter, as a matter of fact, to a very good reliever for the Yankees. We're back to things you'd never think I would say out loud for $500. I'd be interested to see why he decided he didn't want to be a coach anymore. I think Mullins is the one. Bam Bam Mullins is the one that replaces Bochy when his time comes in San Francisco, or else he would have gotten some more interview love. That's who one of the people that you and I chose as people we wanted to see as manager. John Farrell as pitching coach. I don't know if he'd want to do it. And, I think if there's a position that he could probably be good at to rehab his reputation, that would probably be it. I don't. You just hopefully it's people that Martinez likes and knows. It's going to make Drew start to feel old when some of these people that he watched as a player now start to coach. I'm kind of curious to see. Maybe Farrell as a bench coach. I wonder if there's an older, not Girardi as a bench coach, but I wonder who he brings in to be his guru.
Yeah, I think Farrell would be a good candidate for that, just because he has major league experience and Martinez doesn't, so you could kind of help him out a little bit from that aspect. So I think Farrell would be a good fit on the coaching staff, whether it's a pitching coach or a bench coach, if he wants to do it and if Martinez wants him.
I'd love to see as a pitching coach. It'll never happen. It's Pedro Martinez.
Yeah.
We may not watch him on MLB Network, and I just love him. Says, careful, Ron. The Redskins have lost 5 straight. Point being that, that Daniel Snyder cannot get out of the way of the team to let the football people do what they're supposed to do. Jerry Jones does that in Dallas. George Steinbrenner did it for years with the Yankees. You need to let your sports side of the operation do what they need to do, and the business side needs to run in tandem. And teams that don't do that are the ones that get hurt. That's the point I was trying to make. And I thought Judo's joke was funny. I won't repeat it because Seth got upset, but it was funny. Let's see. Be curious to see what happens with the bench coach. We'll talk about this in a couple of weeks, the next time we get together, because then we'll know who has filed for free agency. Do you think, before we start to wrap it up, that they will sign any potential free agents after the World Series? Will they sign a Kinsler? Will they sign a Kendrick? Will they sign a Stephen Drew? Will they let them all go to free agency and see what happens there?
I don't think Kinsler will be back, just because someone will offer him money to be a closer, which Nationals don't really have an opening at closer right now with Dulo pitching the way he was to end the season. So I think Kinsler would be gone, but Kendrick would be a great player to bring back, just with his versatility and his veteran presence. I'd like to see Albers back. I think he'll probably regress a little bit, but he could still be a quality reliever. I'm trying to think of who else they have. I don't know if Drew will be back, just with Defoe, but Defoe's kind of struggled in a bench role, so maybe Drew comes back and Defoe's kind of a guy who steps in if someone gets hurt, and Drew's more of a bench bat. I'd love to see Adam Lind back, but I don't know if he'll be back, just because he deserves to start somewhere, and there's not really a spot for him to start here.
Now, I believe this was Jorge Castillo, or maybe it was Jamal Collier, last week said that the Nationals will start next year under the competitive balance tax, even though that their actual salaries are in the $168 million range, which keeps them below, because it's the annual average value of a deal and not the actual contracts themselves, that they will start under the tax. I'm not sure, or over the tax. I'm not sure how much more money they want to bring on for that. We'll probably take a closer look at that. And Seth says, asks whether Jason Worth would be a bench coach. I think Worth plays next year. I don't think he plays for Washington, but I could see someone giving a shot to Worth as a coach. He is eclectic. It's a polite word to use. I'm not saying it in a nasty way. But I have a hard time seeing Worth conforming enough to be a manager.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be a manager, but I think he could be a great coach. He's obviously been around baseball a long time, and he's been a great player at times. And now, he's past his prime, but he's still a solid player. I think he'll be a somewhat decent DH next year in the American League. He's definitely slowed down defensively, but yeah, I could definitely see him being a coach after his playing days are over.
It was you when you talked with Thomas Boswell a few weeks ago that suggested that Matt Wieters was a future manager.
Yeah, I think Wieters could make a great manager because he's a catcher. They're kind of the like on-field coach, I guess, and he knows the game really well. I think he could make a great manager once his playing days are over. I made a joke that good players typically don't make great managers, so Matt Wieters is that working in his favor.
Yeah, and Eduardo Perez kind of get what when I asked him this, but I think Daniel Murphy is either going to be the hitting coach guru for the next 25 years, or I could see him as a manager. He's just a natural born teacher, which is good because I think the Nats have a lot of natural born leaders. All right. The other thing we want to talk about real quick, and I'll be doing a piece on, I think, tomorrow. I've calmed down enough to actually write words without getting me into trouble. The Baltimore Orioles have decided that Annapolis is in their territory, even though Washington is 1 mile closer than Baltimore. 1 mile. And the 3-year agreement that the Nats had with the Naval Academy to host a game there has been voided. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. They're not really taking away fans from the Orioles. It's a game specifically for people at the Naval Academy, and so you're taking it away from our military. And I just think it's really ridiculous. It's probably Peter Angelos is doing, the Orioles owner. So I'm not a big fan of the Orioles, mostly because of what they're doing in the whole Mazin dispute and just everything that Angelos has done to the Nats since they came to D.C. And now this just adds to it. I think this is really low on his part.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's extremely petty as far as I'm concerned. Maybe they can do some saving of face to get the Orioles and the Nationals play every year at the Naval Academy. The game wasn't the Nats have always done a home preseason game, and the idea of just giving something back to their community, to the Naval Academy. It's Washington, D.C., for goodness sakes. It just made too much sense. And there was a lot of fun last year. And they played in this tiny little ballpark. It was only cadets watching, and it was awesome. And Jason Worth's middle finger made the camera. But anyway, I just think, there's got to be a solution there that doesn't make everyone look like a bunch of poopy heads. I can say that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get filtered for that. All right, so want to give out a couple welcomes. Want to make sure I get people's names right. We have a couple of new writers on staff. If you haven't read Brian Foley's stuff, he'll have a piece tomorrow on the National League East, and you can compete with the Nationals. Sam Phillips has been with us a while, but he's been busy, but he'll be coming back to do some writing for us. I want to make sure I get these names right. I'm supposed to. Help me out here.
Yeah, it's Ross Schinberg and Johnny Verdi.
Thank you. Ross's first piece ran today. He did a very good piece on what AJ Cole's role will be next year. He makes an argument for him as a fifth starter, and for him working out a very good argument about him working out of the bullpen. And Johnny will be with us soon, and so we look forward to seeing what they have to say. I believe he's going to do something on Wade Davis, right?
Yes.
So, all good stuff. So, we're gonna do these on every other Thursday because life happens and Drew has other obligations on Tuesday. So we will not be with you next Thursday. My math is bad. I can't do this in the top of my head. So the DoDCast, unless something needs to be on, will be every other Thursday at the same time, 7 o'clock, and we'll go as long as we need to go. So, and by the way, the website itself smashes record for most ever page views by 50,000. So we'd like to thank all of you who support us and read us and tweet at us and all that. We do this for you, and we're so grateful that you're part of what we do. And so Drew and I wish to thank you for that. Give us a like and follow on Facebook at District on Deck. Follow us on Twitter at District on Deck. Give this video a like and subscribe on YouTube. And you can follow Drew on Twitter at
DrewRD98.
And you can follow me at Ron Juckett, Juckett. And so unless we need to talk to you before then, we'll have 2 pieces going up every day but Sunday. He's Drew Douglas, and I'm Ron Juckett. And we'll talk to you next time. It'll be 2 weeks from Thursday. Enjoy the World Series tonight, everybody. Go Astros.